Here we go. Harper's Magazine, a letter on justice and open debate. This was put out today, and a bunch of people are talking about it on Twitter. Many hot takes have been shared. Here I am about to add my own. Maybe it'll be hot, maybe it won't be. Our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. Powerful protests for racial and social justice are leading to overdue demands for police reform, along with wider calls for greater equality and inclusion across our society, not least in higher education, journalism, philanthropy, and the arts. But this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. So I'm going to take this step by step, okay? So first of all, let's take this sentence by sentence. Our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. True. Powerful protests. Equality. True, that is true. But this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms for open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. Yes, in times of great social strife, in times of discord, people tend to be much more strict on ideological purity because it's much more important to draw lines in the sand. That is generally how it works. That happened in the American Revolution. Hey, folks, before 1776 or whenever the fuck the actual fighting started, you could wiffle waffle on the whole, loyalist patriot thing, okay? After that, you could not wiffle waffle. Eventually, the lines are drawn. People have to, move into one camp or another. That just is how it is. And usually discourse does tend to suffer as a product of that. That is definitely true. As we applaud the first development, we also raise our voices against the second. This is an important sentence that we're going to be coming back to. So essentially, we're very happy that we're getting all this social progress, but we're not happy about this weakening of the norms of open debate. Okay, fine. I've made complaints about cancel culture before. In fact, if you go to this wonderful YouTube channel, youtube.com/Vosh, or however it goes, and you search in my videos, I actually did 4 videos on my problems with the left, which, God, I was so small back then that nowadays the total view count that each of these videos has is about the same number of views I get 2 hours after I release a video today. So I guess nobody's seen these videos, but yeah. Wow. It's come a long way. I have criticized some of these intellectual tendencies as well myself. So, the forces of illiberalism are gaining strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump, who represents a real threat to democracy. But resistance must not be allowed to hearken into its own brand of dogma or coercion, which right-wing demagogues are already exploiting. I'll get back to that one. The democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that is set in on all sides. So I disagree with the framing. I disagree strongly with the framing that this challenge to the norms of fair debate is coming in from both sides in any comparable degree. I will say this. Over the past decade or so, the left has probably gotten more tight-fisted. No, this was not by Chomsky. It's an open letter. The left has probably gotten a little bit more tight-fisted and ideologically pure. The right was never interested in open debate. The history of this country has been one of progressives fighting against the illiberalism of the conservatives in this country. There are no conservatives who participate fairly in open debate, because if they did, they would not be conservatives. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. This myth that there are people who are reaching out from both sides to debate, and this is being pushed in from both sides as well, is not true. It is not. Conservatives are not interested in fair and open discourse. They are not interested in discussing these ideas, and they are and always have been the greatest impediments to fair, open, and reasonable debate in this country. And this is why I take issue with this. The idea that right-wing demagogues are exploiting this, we'll just say this cancel culture-esque attitude. I take great issue with this. Conservatives have been bitching that they are being censored and socially stamped on for all of history. This is not something contingent upon the presence of lefties looking to cancel. For as long as there have been conservatives in this country, there have been people screeching that everything that they know and love, American culture, white happiness, Western society, are being trampled by the likes of, in often case, student protesters. I firmly reject this idea that the behavior of people on the left allows the right to exploit the culture and the climate. They would be feeling persecuted no matter what. The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. I'm not sure what we mean by that. The free exchange of information and ideas is becoming more constricted. In what sense? Like, Donald Trump has openly challenged, like, First Amendment rights many times over the course of his presidency, but what are we talking about here? Like, what, people are being mean on Twitter? What do we mean? Right now, we live in an era of unprecedented open speech on the internet. You could argue about a decade ago was maybe a little more open because website TOS policy was a lot more lax back then. But apart from that, I mean, yeah, like, for the most part, like, discourse is very, discourse, it's not a matter of discourse being free. It's that discourse isn't controlled or principled. Everyone's saying everything. I can go online and in seconds find a Holocaust denier or an anarchist. And, great, sure, fantastic. These opinions are out there. The issue is that this discourse is not taking place in an honest or constructive manner. But I don't know what this means exactly. While we have come to expect this on the radical right, censoriousness is also spreading more widely in our culture. An intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues in a blinding moral certainty. This is true to an extent, and I appreciate the fact that they clarify that this is something the right has always done, but I would like specific examples because I don't like the idea of people just using this as a blind condemnation of what they call cancel culture. And we will get to that because one of the people who signed this open letter which began with a commitment to the principles of racial and social justice, was, I shit you not, J.K. Rowling. So, I wonder, speaking of right-wing demagogues exploiting left-leaning behavior, we uphold the value of robust and even caustic counterspeech from all quarters, but it is now all too common to hear calls for swift and severe retribution in response to perceived transgressions of speech and thought. What is that? What does this mean? I can't help but feel like this is tied in pretty deeply with Rowling because that's the most like public sort of, that's one of the most like public free speech cancel culture things happening over the past couple of months. But what severe retribution? J.K. Rowling is an obscenely powerful person. J.K. Rowling is unfathomably powerful. Her cultural influence is difficult to overstate. She is very, very powerful. So for us to, I don't know, I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to be about J.K., but the way this is being framed, it's very difficult for me to understand the context behind, like, this alleged, severe retribution. More troubling still, institutional leaders, in a spirit of panicked damage control, are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishments instead of considered reforms. What does this mean? Editors are fired for running controversial pieces. I would need examples for this. If an editor works for an organization and the organization doesn't like the backlash it gets after the release of a piece, they have a right to fire that person. I would need to know. This is so vague. Books are withdrawn for alleged inauthenticity. What is this referring to? Alleged inauthenticity? Wait, if a book is inauthentic, you mean like it's libelous? Like there was a lawsuit against it? I don't know what that means. Journalists are barred from writing on certain topics. Okay, but journalists have been barred from writing on certain topics for centuries. And it's not because of cancel culture. It's because the billion-dollar corporations that finance these journalists don't want certain topics being looked into. This isn't a cancel culture thing. This is corporate media thing. But this has nothing to do with corporate media. I don't know. Professors are investigated for quoting works of literature in class. Is this in reference to that Jordan Peterson thing? That literal one instance of that professor quoting Jordan Peterson, and then there was some public backlash, but that's it, and that's all that happened? This is very snowflakey. I don't think these examples, if they're referring to what I'm thinking they're referring to, I don't think these examples are indicative of a massive cultural backlash against free and open and civil discourse. I think that we live in heightened times, and in the myriad of, we have media figures who are essentially fascists who get a massive amount of public attention. Jordan Peterson, I would feel comfortable saying that Jordan Peterson is, if not a fascist, at the very least a chauvinist Western traditionalist. And these people get an unfathomable amount of attention. The world is being eclipsed by the visions of far-right agents. And the abstraction of these incidents is, it makes me feel like we're doing the thing now. We're doing the thing where conservatives will be like, oh yeah, Trump may be anti-free speech with all of his presidential decrees against First Amendment rights, but have you looked at college campuses lately? Pretty anti-free speech when that one college in Iowa did a protest against a professor. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting from this. Now, I could be wrong, but the article is so vague that I don't know. Now, of course, it can't be super specific because they don't want to dedicate 3,000 words to every specific instance they're referring to. But do you guys agree with me? I'm trying to be fair or considerate here. I feel the way this is being phrased leaves it open to some very weird sort of cultural predilections. And the heads of organizations are ousted for what are sometimes clumsy mistakes. This is not something new. This has always been the case. Whatever the arguments around each particular incident, the result has been to steadily narrow the boundaries of what can be said without the threat of reprisal. Is this true? I don't think this is true. I feel like people in power can say, like, fucking whatever for the most part. I mean, and if that's not the case, then in what ways are the range of acceptable speech being tightened? Is acceptable speech being tightened not a good thing when we're becoming more progressive? 100 years ago, you as a business person could be like, yes, I'd love to give you money, but I can't give you loan because you're a Negro and you're dumb because you're black. Sorry. And that would be like acceptable discourse back then, for a variety of reasons. Now, you can't do that today. Is that not a good thing? Is that not perhaps have we not made a positive change? I would argue that in some instances, limiting the range of acceptable discourse is actually a good thing. Because, frankly, I don't want to live in a society, and I hope you guys would agree with me on this, I don't want to live in a society where every time a person with incredible social power comes out as an open bigot, we all have to wring our hands and treat it like some sort of reasonable debate. Like if JonTron came out in that debate with Destiny to talk about all those white nationalist talking points, and instead of everyone doing what they did, which was say, holy shit, JonTron, what the fuck, they were all like, well, we should consider the extent to which Hispanics entering the gene pool would damage American society. Like, is that really what we want? We can debate these ideas if you want, but social condemnation for bigotry is, and as far as I'm concerned, generally a good thing. We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion amongst writers, artists, and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the consensus or even lack sufficient seal and agreement. You know who gets canceled and threatened with reprisal harder than anyone who criticizes Black Lives Matter? Any woman who ever posted anything about the problems in gaming culture during Gamergate. Holy fuck. That is the truest shit I've ever said in my life. I guess I'm just not seeing this that much. Maybe people are being a little more careful with their language, but I don't know if that's representative of some horrible threat to our discourse. Yeah, a lot of those writers during the Gamergate days were literally blacklisted because like the companies didn't want to take on the writings of people who were like toxins to the gaming community. That's true, but how does that relate to this? The point that I'm getting at is that this letter, this open letter, is basically like an argument that the left has gone too far with cancel culture. It dresses it up with fancier language, but that's essentially what's being said. And I take issue with the framing here. I take issue with the idea that these are necessarily representative of a bad direction our society has taken. I take issue with the idea that this is a severe problem, that this is something even worth wringing our hands over. And I take issue with the idea that this is behavior which is in any way specific to left-leaning people. I know that in this letter they say that this is something that's always been expected in right-leaning circles, but again, I don't know. The framing of this, it feels like a caveat, you know, like, oh, I'll acknowledge the right does this as well, but now let's talk about cancel culture. It's just a little weird. The stifling atmosphere will ultimately harm the most vital causes of our time. The restriction of debate, whether by a repressive government or an intolerant society, this shit right here is what I mean. Holy fuck. The difference between a repressive government jailing people for saying certain things and a society being intolerant of certain ideas is night and day. It is night and day. To lump these two together is to put people who suffer cancel culture in the same ideological category as people who are jailed by like the Chinese government or by like Bolsonaro's government. Like the equivocacy here is ridiculous. Invariably hurts those who lack power and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence them or wish them away. I don't know, nobody's talking about wishing them away. Nobody's talking about silencing either. Listen to how dishonest the language of this letter is. What do we mean by silence? What about challenging? How much of this has to do with silencing and how much of it has to do with challenging these ideas? These things are so different. It's incredible to me. Also, the way to defeat bad ideas is exposure, argument, and persuasion? No, idiot. The way to defeat ideas is power. You seize control of institutions, you do everything within your legal and moral right to destroy the ability for them to disseminate their ideas, you excise them from society, you make intolerant their perspectives, and then you obfuscate any granules of truth they're able to get out. I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. I'm really, 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 really sorry. Remember how socialism was a dirty word in America for a century and still is? Did the American government do that by exposing, arguing with, and persuading people? Really, let's really think about this for a hot second, okay? How did that work out? Let's talk, speaking of repressive governments, okay? Let's talk about, when they decided, when the government was, our society was anti-gay, I guess they did it by arguing with gay people, exposing society to pro-gay arguments, and then persuading people that being gay was bad. No, it's about fucking power, you stupid liberal dipshits. Now, the degree to which you feel morally comfortable exercising power over others with regards to limiting the range of free discourse is an entirely different conversation. But when you frame this discourse from the perspective of, well, this is such a Jordan Peters, the free marketplace of ideas is actually the most effective way to destroy it. No, it fucking isn't. I'm sorry, how did Nazi Germany obliterate like fucking 98% of acceptable civil discourse within their country? Oh, yeah, the SS would go to your house. Hello? Do we have any Jews in here? We are hosting a public debate to determine the worthwhileness of your humanity. You can come here at 4 p.m. Or later at 6 p.m., we're having runoff round. What the fuck are you talking about? That wasn't a great German accent, but. Yeah. Was sind die Juden? Like, no. That's not how it works. That's not how power works. Okay? Oh, and for the record, too, the positions that I take issue with, the fascism, the reactionary politics, what have you, these positions are also not achieved through exposure, argument, and persuasion. All these fucking dumbfuck Sargon of Akkad fans or Stefan Molyneux fans, these people didn't get into what they did because they engaged with the discourse online and saw ideas battle against each other. They got into it because they watched a couple of SJW Wrecked compilations when they were 12 and ended up getting groomed by people deliberately trying to pull, like, young men into, like, a far-right, like, political scheme. It wasn't a product of them engaging with the marketplace of ideas. It was just a form of exploitation. God, this is such... Noam Chomsky, why did you read this? I know Noam Chomsky is a huge fucking pro-free speech deuterino, and I respect that, but this is just patently wrong. This is aggressively liberal. You need to give an example of a good idea making it through via power in order for this argument to work? Yeah, abolitionism. We wanted to get rid of slavery. They didn't. We marched in. We slaughtered them. We burnt them to the ground. We built them back up. And now people who claim that they're pro-slavery aren't even well, at least they used to be before the advent of fucking YouTube, aren't even treated with, like, the time of day. We don't entertain discourse on whether or not it's okay to enslave blacks anymore. And when people do say they think it's okay to enslave blacks, in most parts of this country, they are not given jobs, they are not taken seriously, they are not respected. Now, there are, in some parts of this country, people who entertain these ideas. But yeah, power is what wins arguments. Now, anyway. We refuse any false choice between justice and freedom. Again, I do not think freedom means freedom from criticism, which cannot exist without the other. As writers, we need a culture that leaves us room for experimentation, risk-taking, and even mistakes. Again, when writers get quote-unquote canceled, they don't do it because they take a risk and fuck up. They usually do it because they say something unfathomably stupid or bigoted and then quadruple down on it in Twitter, okay? I've seen a lot of journalists, like, fucking nosedive. It's usually not somebody, like, doing an edgy, evocative hit piece that ends up getting interpreted wrong. It's usually somebody with a really stupid idea, like going on Twitter and arguing about it for the next 6 months of their life until, like, they're associated with nothing other than the bad take they fucking died on a hill defending. We need to preserve the possibility of good faith disagreement without dire professional consequences. We already have that. If we won't defend the very thing on which our work depends, we shouldn't expect the public or the state to defend it for us. I don't know what this means. You already defend the thing on which your work depends. I don't know exactly what you mean. This is, dumb. Do you think people like Rowling are subtly using the letter to exercise their power to obfuscate the meaning of free speech? No, they're not doing it subtly. Obviously. Look through the list of people who signed off on it. Oh, here's Steven Pinker. Hello, my old friend. The people who are on this list, a lot of them are right-leaning people, even though this letter is supposed to take place from the perspective and language of a left-leaning person. Why do you think they do that? They do that because these people benefit from obfuscating the medium of freedom of speech. Listen to all the obfuscation taking place here. So they conflate. So what are we talking about? We're talking about criticizing media figures for their takes. But then we're talking about how this is anti-freedom. And then we talk about how we're not allowing people the room to grow from their messages. And we're talking about how we're trying to silence them or wish them away. And we're talking about how this is like a repressive government silencing speech. There are like 4 or 5 different like associative forms of political disenfranchisement that are all being rolled down into what is essentially cancel culture. But this is what conservatives do. We might as well have seen a list of fucking right-wing comedians signing off on this. Well, I can't call people in my audience the N-word anymore. The cancel culture's gone too far. We might as well have seen that because all this is a hack rush job designed to lend credibility to the idea that people who criticize bigots in power are opposed to freedom of speech. This is a form of silencing. What else could this be interpreted as? While this document may itself speak up against silencing, its unwillingness to commit to any specific examples or any specific positions, while obfuscating the meaning of freedom of speech, goes a long way towards empowering far-right positions when it comes to the civil rights people are endowed with and the moral justification of criticizing those who oppose bigotry. This is a very bad letter. And I am disappointed that Noam Chomsky signed off on it. Chomsky has always been pretty much like a crazy fucking pro free speech deuterino. The main reason for that being is that he is a leftist who lived through the Red Scare. He had lived through the McCarthy era times. He's old as fuck, which means that he is always going to be really free speech because he believes that free speech in its totality and every conceivable form of protection against consequence is something that bolsters the left. I don't think Chomsky probably doesn't know how to run a fucking bathtub. Like but Chomsky probably has like a wooden bucket in his house that he has like a handmaid pour water over his hair with. I love him. I do love him. Seriously, Chomsky's work is is pivotal to me. But Chomsky is not currently plugged into is not currently plugged into the online culture war. He's not. He is not. When Chomsky signed this letter, I don't think he was thinking, how does he do his voice? Yes. Now, Stefan Molyneux can get his channel back because YouTube banning Stefan Molyneux's channel was a violation of his First Amendment rights. I think Noam Chomsky is very dedicated in the abstract to the ideas of freedom and free expression. And that's a wonderful thing. But the language of this letter in the context of modern political discourse, I think, bolsters some very, very irresponsible positions. And that's my opinion. Now, I will say this one more time. If you love freedom of speech, step one is keeping far-right people from getting into power, okay? Because all the pro-free speech principle in the world doesn't mean shit as soon as fascists get into power, using that freedom of speech and then tear it away from all the rest of us. So with that being said, always, always, always recognize that the perfect execution of freedom of speech is always one which will take into account the fact that certain forms of speech are actually damaging to our ability to maintain those social goals. And while I don't say the government should arrest or imprison any of these people for the things they say, I have never advocated for that. The idea that social condemnation is in any way equivalent to the repression of a totalitarian government is fucking ridiculous. And that's all I've got to say. What is this? Anyone on the left now pretending to have moral and intellectual superiority to Noam Chomsky is hilarious. I love that he signed that letter. If you think Chomsky should shut up because he doesn't agree with you, I love how stupid you are and you missed the whole point. Well, Cenk, I'm not sure who you're referring to exactly, but the wonderful thing is I'm actually capable of criticizing things I don't like without attempting to shut up or silence the people I disagree with. How wonderful. This is a perfect example of the reactionary defense against counterculture that I was just referring to. Because as I just demonstrated, I'm actually perfectly capable of criticizing something without trying to bury the people who disagree with me. So there you go. There, that was a little demonstration for you guys. You like that part? See, I navigate. It all paid off in the end with that tweet. You know how it is.